What if a single sheet of paper could shake the foundation of a royal family? What if a mundane school record, buried in a file folder for decades, suddenly became the epicenter of chaos, panic, and a race across continents? Picture this: a quiet morning disrupted by the sound of an urgent phone call, a plane ticket booked in secret, and a father racing back to a country he once left, not as a visitor, but as a man on a mission. This is not a story about tabloids, gossip, or headlines. This is a story about systems, secrets, and the fragile line between privacy and power. Welcome to the day that fictional events turned ordinary documents into a maelstrom that no one saw coming. It all started with a simple inconsistency: a name, a date, a line in a form that didn't match expectations. For most families, this would barely register. Perhaps a correction, a phone call, a minor adjustment. But in the world of royalty, nothing is minor. Every letter carries weight. Every form has implications. Every name is a thread in a tapestry of history, inheritance, and public perception. And when that thread suddenly frays, it can unravel more than anyone anticipates. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine being Prince Harry in this fictional narrative, a man already living under immense scrutiny, balancing public expectation with private responsibility. One moment, he's abroad, attending engagements, living life on his terms. The next, a single internal report is flagged, and suddenly, the world he thought he could navigate at a distance starts closing in. The details are vague at first, just numbers, dates, names, but the implications are immediate. A palace official, someone who notices discrepancies as a matter of procedure, makes a phone call. And that phone call sets a series of events in motion that no one could have predicted. Why would a school record matter? Why would a document that should be routine send shockwaves through Buckingham Palace? It's simple, yet devastating. For royals, documentation is more than bureaucracy. It's legitimacy, identity, and continuity. The lineage recorded in a single sheet carries centuries of expectation. If that sheet falters, if that record misaligns even slightly, questions arise. And once questions arise in the palace, silence is not neutral. Silence is strategy. Silence is suspicion. Silence is the quiet drumbeat that something is amiss, even when no one outside the walls knows what is unfolding. In this story, the document did not leak to the media. No tabloids broke the news. There were no headlines screaming scandal. This was internal, controlled. But as with all secrets, control is fragile. One small oversight, one email forwarded without thought, one conversation held in the wrong room, and the information spreads faster than anyone could contain. And in this fictional account, it spread quietly, internally, until it reached the ears of someone who could not ignore it: Harry. The phone call that allegedly triggered his immediate return was terse, urgent, and emotionally charged. "You need to see this." That was all. No explanation, no reassurance, just urgency. For a man whose life has been dissected publicly, whose every decision is scrutinized, this call was different. It was personal. It demanded action. It demanded presence. And within hours, Harry was on a plane, leaving behind the comfort of distance for the chaos of immediacy. He was rushing back to the UK not just as a father, but as someone confronting a system that had always been rigid, procedural, and unyielding. And yet, it's not just about him. At the center of this unfolding drama is a child. Fictionalized, of course, but still a child whose life is tethered to systems far larger than he could comprehend. In most families, school records are private, mundane, administrative. In this narrative, the stakes are different. They are monumental. They carry weight beyond the imagination of ordinary citizens. And every decision, every disclosure, every hesitation ripples outward, touching lives, reputations, and legacies. Why now? Why would this fictional event trigger such a response at this exact moment? Timing, as ever, is everything. Perhaps it's the increased media scrutiny surrounding royal lives. Perhaps it's the subtle shifts within the palace hierarchy, the quiet realignment of power, the kind of internal recalibration the public never sees. Maybe it's both. And perhaps it's the simple fact that even the smallest inconsistency, when amplified by history, tradition, and emotion becomes impossible to ignore. The very systems designed to protect and maintain continuity can, in moments like these, create crises of unprecedented scope. The tension escalates because this is not a story that allows for easy answers. There is no public statement, no formal denial, no clarifying report. Instead, there is anticipation, uncertainty, and the electric suspense that comes from knowing that something critical has been discovered but not yet revealed. The audience, the public, and the fictional Harry are all in the same boat, suspended in the unknown, waiting for the first signs of clarity. But clarity, in this story, is elusive. The systems that could provide it are precisely the ones that complicate it. And that's what makes this narrative compelling, suspenseful, and emotionally gripping. Consider the emotional undertones. Harry, caught between love for his family and frustration with an institution that often seems impenetrable, experiences a storm of feelings: anxiety, fear, determination, protectiveness. The palace, calm and calculating, views the situation through a lens of policy, precedents, and long-term consequences. And in between, the child is an unwitting center of attention, a figure around whom the fictional narrative pivots. These emotional contrasts, personal urgency versus institutional cool, private concern versus public curiosity, create tension that carries the story forward. And the curiosity gap is carefully engineered. From the first moment, the audience is led to wonder, what exactly is in this record? Why does it matter? Who noticed it first? Why didn't it stay buried? Every chapter, every section, every twist is designed to pull viewers deeper, to maintain engagement, and to tease information that will only be revealed later. This is the mechanics of a high-retention exposé, the promise of revelation without immediate satisfaction, the art of suspense wrapped in storytelling, emotion, and intrigue. As this fictional story unfolds, the audience is encouraged to speculate, to imagine, to question. The unknown becomes a narrative device, driving engagement, discussion, and curiosity. Questions like, what would you do if a single piece of paperwork threatened to upend everything you've built? How far would you go to protect your family? And what happens when the systems designed to maintain order inadvertently spark chaos? These questions are the heart of the drama, the engine that propels the narrative from the introduction to the chapters that follow. And just when the tension feels almost unbearable, the introduction ends with a mini cliffhanger, the suggestion that the internal alert did not come from the press, nor from gossip, nor from an external adversary. It came from within. Someone noticed the discrepancy, flagged it, and set the dominoes in motion. And that's when Harry's race began. A plane ticket booked in secrecy, a flight crossing oceans, a father returning not as a celebrity, not as a public figure, but as a man confronting the implications of a system he both trusts and distrusts. The stage is set. The players are introduced. The stakes are established. And the audience is left wondering, what exactly did the document contain? Who will act first? What will happen when private systems collide with public curiosity? The tension is palpable, the intrigue irresistible, and the story is only just beginning. The answers are buried in the chapters that follow, each one unraveling more layers, exposing more surprises, and deepening the emotional stakes. And every revelation, every twist, is designed to maintain curiosity, suspense, and engagement, ensuring that viewers remain riveted from start to finish. It establishes characters, stakes, and questions. It creates a curiosity gap that begs to be filled. And it ends on a cliffhanger that naturally transitions into the first chapter, the discovery of the document that set everything in motion. It started as an ordinary day at an ordinary school, the kind of day that most people would never remember. Teachers shuffled through papers, administrative assistants filed records, and students moved between classrooms, blissfully unaware that one file held the power to ignite a chain reaction that would cross oceans and reach the halls of Buckingham Palace. For the staff, the records were just part of the routine, the mundane backbone of education. Enrollment forms, vaccination logs, emergency contacts. Nothing more, nothing less. But sometimes, the most innocuous pieces of paper carry secrets. Sometimes, a line typed in the wrong place, a checkbox ticked incorrectly, or a name that doesn't match the official record can trigger consequences far beyond what anyone imagines. That's what happened here. A single document, a fictionalized school record for a boy named Archie Harrison, sat in a folder among dozens of others. At first glance, there was nothing unusual, just a standard enrollment form, completed and filed by a conscientious administrator. Yet, as the administrator scanned the information one final time, a single detail made the air in the room feel heavier. A father's name didn't match expectations. A birth certificate referenced a name that seemed off. For most parents, this would be a minor inconvenience, something that could be corrected with a phone call or a signed affidavit. But in this fictional narrative, the stakes were anything but minor. Because this wasn't just any child, and this wasn't just any family. The boy in question carried a lineage that millions of people worldwide followed with fascination, envy, and curiosity. And in the world of royalty, where history, tradition, and legacy intertwine, the line in a school record wasn't just administrative, it was symbolic. The administrator didn't panic. In fact, she was trained to notice discrepancies. It was part of her job to flag inconsistencies, ensure that records were accurate, and report anomalies through the proper channels. What she didn't realize was that this was no ordinary discrepancy. This was a ripple in calm waters that would turn into a tsunami. She picked up the phone, dialed the number of the designated internal liaison, and whispered what she had noticed. Her words were calm, procedural, professional. But what happened next was anything but routine. The report made its way up the chain of command, moving quietly through the institution's internal monitoring system. Each step was designed to review, verify, and confirm before action. No alarm bells were rung. No public statement was necessary. But the higher it went, the more the stakes became apparent. And the higher it went, the more people in positions of power realized that something, however minor it seemed on paper, demanded immediate attention. It was ironic, in a way, that a document meant to maintain order could create such disorder. The school record was supposed to be innocuous, a small cog in the machinery of education and administration. Yet, by following protocol, by simply doing her job, the administrator had triggered a chain of events that could not be undone. Every step forward, every review, every verification only amplified the significance of that single line. The discrepancy was minor on paper, but monumental in implication. And that tension, between the mundane and the monumental, is what drove the story forward. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Prince Harry was unaware of the storm brewing in a quiet school office. He was living his life abroad, attending events, engaging with charities, and navigating the unique pressures of a public figure with private concerns. And yet, in the span of a few hours, his world would tilt. One phone call, one urgent message, one document, quietly flagged, would demand his immediate attention. And in a matter of hours, he would be on a plane, rushing back to the UK, not as a celebrity, not as a prince, but as a father confronting a potential crisis with implications that stretched far beyond the classroom. But let's pause and consider the human element. The administrator who discovered the discrepancy didn't know the magnitude of her action. She wasn't seeking to create drama. She wasn't motivated by gossip or curiosity. She was following procedure, ensuring accuracy, and maintaining integrity. And yet, in doing so, she became an inadvertent catalyst in a story that would capture public imagination. Her actions, quiet and measured, exemplify a truth that resonates far beyond this fictional narrative. Sometimes, ordinary diligence sparks extraordinary consequences. At the center of this unfolding drama is the notion of perception. A line on a document might seem inconsequential to someone unfamiliar with the layers of tradition, legacy, and expectation that underpin royalty. But within the context of an institution that balances centuries of history with modern scrutiny, that line carries weight. It's a reminder that in systems as complex as these, minor details can escalate into major dilemmas. And the document itself, typed, scanned, filed, became a symbol of the tension between human error and institutional vigilance. The drama intensifies because the discrepancy was not immediately apparent to everyone. Some people reviewing the record might have glanced at it and moved on, satisfied that everything appeared normal. But the administrator's trained eye, sharpened by experience and attention to detail, noticed the anomaly. And that attention to detail, that commitment to doing the right thing, is what triggered the next phase of the story. As the document moved up the chain, whispers of concern spread. Not to the media, not to the public, but internally. One official flagged it. Another reviewed it. A third noted the implications. And somewhere along the line, a connection was made. This wasn't just a paperwork error. This was a potential discrepancy in a record that carried extraordinary significance. The recognition of that significance transformed what could have been a mundane administrative correction into a high-stakes, emotionally charged situation. And so, a quiet, routine school day became the starting point of a narrative that would span continents, institutions, and public attention. What began as a single observation evolved into a complex story of responsibility, urgency, and the collision between private life and public duty. The tension is not in overt action, but in anticipation. The slow realization that one small anomaly can set events into motion that no one can fully control. The narrative also explores the emotional undercurrents. For Harry, the rush back to the UK was not merely logistical, it was personal. The stakes were higher because they were intertwined with love, responsibility, and the instinct to protect a child. And for the administrators, officials, and staff navigating the labyrinthine systems of the institution, there was a quiet awareness that their actions, though procedural, could have ramifications far beyond their offices. The emotional resonance of diligence, responsibility, and consequence creates a tension that captivates attention. By the end of the chapter, the stage is set for the next phase. Harry's urgent return, the internal deliberations within the palace, and the unfolding realization that this simple document carries consequences that no one anticipated. And just when it seems the chain of events might settle, the cliffhanger emerges. The document has reached someone who cannot ignore it, someone whose life and decisions will alter the trajectory of this narrative entirely. At first glance, a school record seems harmless. A simple list of dates, names, and addresses. A checklist of vaccinations, emergency contacts, grades, and attendance. To most people, it is nothing more than administrative routine, a necessary formality, easily filed away and forgotten. But in the context of royalty, nothing is ever just routine. Every document is a reflection of legacy. Every line carries history, expectation, and scrutiny. In the fictional narrative we are exploring, a single school record became the most potent symbol of how even mundane paperwork can ripple through centuries of tradition. Why does it matter so much? Imagine a tapestry, centuries in the making. Each thread is a person, a title, a right, a recognition. Pull one thread, and the fabric begins to unravel, subtly at first, then dramatically. In this story, that thread was a line on a school form. The school record is not just a document. It is a declaration of identity, an affirmation of lineage. And for a child born into royal proximity, identity is not private. It is public, documented, and scrutinized. A simple misalignment, even a clerical error, can become a metaphorical earthquake, shaking the foundations of perception, trust, and authority. The stakes are higher because these records are connected to official documents that date back generations. Birth certificates, baptismal registries, school enrollment files, and government-issued IDs form an interconnected web. Within that web, a single inconsistency is like a loose knot. It may seem minor on its own, but its existence threatens to reveal something larger, something institutional, something that no one can ignore. For the administrators who discovered the discrepancy, the immediate concern was accuracy. But for the palace, accuracy is not just about correctness, it is about legitimacy. Legitimacy is everything in this world. The monarchy is an institution that relies on continuity, tradition, and public confidence. Every royal child, every heir, every line of succession is meticulously documented. School records, while seemingly peripheral, serve as a verification point. They confirm identity. They connect the child to recognized parents, titles, and privileges. And when a record doesn't match, it sends shockwaves through systems designed to assume alignment. The implications are subtle, yet far-reaching. Is there an administrative oversight, or is there something more? In this fictionalized story, the discrepancy was minor on the surface. A father's name appeared differently than expected. For most families, that would be a footnote. For the palace, it triggered internal alerts, discussions, and review procedures. Each step of the process is procedural, measured, and deliberate, but every step magnifies the significance of what is being reviewed. The web of verification that is supposed to maintain order suddenly amplifies tension. The line between minor error and major concern blurs. Consider the perspective of the staff handling these records. They are trained to notice irregularities, but they rarely, if ever, witness the consequences of their observations reaching the highest levels of power. In this story, the administrator's diligence inadvertently became the catalyst for a transatlantic response. A single phone call moved up the chain of command, transforming routine diligence into urgent action. The attention to detail, the commitment to accuracy, and the procedural integrity of the staff intersected with history, legacy, and expectation to create tension that no one anticipated. Why is it particularly tense in the context of royalty? Because the monarchy is both public and private. A royal child is protected under the law, but their identity is intertwined with public perception. A document that questions that identity, even indirectly, has the power to destabilize the narrative that the institution presents. Every official record is both a verification of reality and a symbolic assertion of legacy. It is a constant balancing act. Maintaining privacy while satisfying public curiosity, securing legitimacy while navigating bureaucracy. And in this story, that balance was about to be tested. School records also act as verification points for multiple systems: legal, educational, and ceremonial. They connect to health records, government documents, and institutional archives. Inaccuracies, therefore, are not just minor mistakes. They represent vulnerabilities. They are weak points that institutions must address quickly to prevent speculation, misinterpretation, or unintended consequences. In the fictional narrative, the flagged inconsistency became a focal point, revealing just how delicate the equilibrium is between private life and public scrutiny for those connected to royal lineage. The emotional stakes cannot be overstated. For a parent, even a fictionalized one, the idea that a routine administrative detail could escalate into a crisis is terrifying. Imagine Harry, thousands of miles away, receiving news that a document concerning his child has raised alarms within the palace bureaucracy. His first reaction would be instinctual: protect, investigate, and act. Every parent can relate to the protective instinct, but when layered over the weight of institutional scrutiny, media speculation, and centuries of expectation, that instinct takes on an urgency that is almost tangible. At the same time, the palace must operate methodically. Emotion cannot drive decisions. Policy, precedent, and protocol guide responses. Officials review the flagged document, compare it against archives, consult legal frameworks, and deliberate on the appropriate course of action. Yet, even in this calculated environment, the human element seeps in. Concern for the child, recognition of public sensitivity, and the need to maintain institutional credibility all collide. Every decision carries consequences. Every pause carries tension. And every step forward heightens the anticipation of what is to come. The weight of history adds another layer. Royal institutions operate with awareness that today's actions become tomorrow's historical record. A minor inconsistency today could be magnified decades later. Scholars, historians, and genealogists scrutinize official documents for patterns, anomalies, and insights. The smallest misalignment may one day appear in academic journals, biographies, or public archives. Awareness of this long-term scrutiny influences every step of the internal response. Even fictionalized, the psychological pressure of such enduring visibility creates drama, tension, and stakes that resonate with the audience. And yet, there is an irony here. The very document designed to assert identity and continuity becomes a source of tension precisely because it is so mundane. Paperwork, signatures, dates, these elements are unremarkable, almost invisible. But within the palace context, their invisibility is deceptive. They are potent markers of identity, legitimacy, and expectation. When accuracy is questioned, the ripple effects are immediate. This is the paradox at the heart of the story. ordinary systems creating extraordinary drama. The fictional story also underscores the contrast between perception and reality. From the outside, school records appear trivial. To the administrators, they are procedural. To the palace, they are foundational. And to Harry, they are personal, urgent, and threatening. This collision of perspectives is what drives the narrative forward, creating suspense, curiosity, and emotional tension. The audience is invited to see how a single document, when viewed through multiple lenses, can carry weight far beyond its apparent importance. By the end of the chapter, the audience understands that the school record is not just paperwork. It is a symbol of identity, legitimacy, and institutional vigilance. It sets the stage for the next phase, the palace reaction. Officials, now aware of the flag discrepancy, begin a calculated evaluation of its significance. The narrative tension escalates because the audience knows the document has reached someone who cannot ignore it. And as anticipation builds, the question lingers. How will the palace respond? And how will Harry react to a situation that began with something as simple as a line on a form? The palace is a place where silence speaks louder than words. In the halls that echo with centuries of tradition, statements are weighed with precision, and every utterance carries consequences far beyond its immediate audience. In this fictional narrative, when the flag school record surfaced, the response was not immediate outrage, not a flurry of press releases, and not a public statement. It was silence, but not the kind of silence that indicates an action. This was deliberate, measured, and calculated. A silence that hinted at awareness, assessment, and anticipation. Imagine being inside the palace when the alert first arrives. A minor discrepancy has been flagged, yet the implications ripple outward. Officials convene behind closed doors, papers shuffle across polished oak tables, and aides whisper details with careful restraint. No cameras, no press, no leaking to the media. In this controlled environment, the word leak itself carries an almost sacred weight, because the institution relies on discretion to maintain authority, credibility, and stability. Every word spoken, or deliberately withheld, shapes perception, both internally and externally. Why silence? Because in royal operations, silence is a strategic tool. It communicates control, minimizes panic, and allows the institution to assess the situation without feeding speculation. The public rarely sees these deliberations, and the media rarely penetrates them. Silence allows for internal calculation. Who has the facts? Who is responsible? And what are the consequences of acknowledgement versus denial? Every official knows that words spoken prematurely can spiral into misinterpretation. So they wait, observe, and analyze. And yet, silence carries tension. In a world so meticulously structured, the absence of immediate action is louder than any statement. For those involved, officials, staff, and family members alike, the silence is suffocating. It suggests urgency without revealing details. It signals awareness without providing reassurance. And to an outsider, especially someone like Harry, thousands of miles away, it creates a sense of foreboding. The uncertainty is as sharp as any sword. Inside the palace, discussions are both strategic and procedural. Advisors weigh the significance of the flagged record. Legal teams consider precedents and potential ramifications. Communications directors debate phrasing and timing for potential public acknowledgement. The tension between private management and public expectation becomes palpable. The institution is aware that even a minor clerical anomaly can spiral into speculation, misinterpretation, or scandal. Thus, silence is both shield and signal, a paradox that underscores the delicate balance of power, perception, and legacy. Meanwhile, rumors begin to circulate, quietly, internally. Staff who notice unusual movement, subtle conversations, or heightened activity speculate among themselves. But the outside world is unaware. There are no headlines, no social media alerts, no paparazzi. The tension builds in invisible ways, creating a suspense that is almost tangible. The audience of this fictional story is left in anticipation. Something is happening, the consequences are significant, and yet no one outside the inner circle knows what it is. The palace is also acutely aware of the human element. Documents and policies matter, but so do emotions, relationships, and personal stakes. Harry, as the father, is a variable in this complex equation. The institution understands that any perceived delay or mishandling could trigger immediate action. The internal actors must balance procedure with awareness of human emotion. Anticipating the response of a man who has navigated public scrutiny for years but now faces a personal challenge with private implications. And therein lies the irony. The document, ordinary on its face, has forced extraordinary measures. Silence, carefully maintained, is meant to control the narrative. But in doing so, it heightens anxiety, fuels imagination, and primes the stage for escalation. Every pause, every measured moment, signals that something significant is unfolding. It is a calculated tension, engineered through the absence of overt action. And it works. The sense of urgency grows not because of what has been said, but because of what has not been said. As hours pass, the palace begins a structured assessment. Internal memos circulate, verifying details against archives, legal documents, and historical precedent. Advisors consult quietly, weighing the implications. No conclusions are announced. Every observation is documented, every analysis noted, but the public remains unaware. This process is deliberate, methodical, and, from the outside, invisible. But inside, it is a maelstrom of tension, concern, and anticipation. The silence, however, is not just procedural, it is psychological. The palace knows that perception shapes reality. If the public senses panic, the institution appears vulnerable. If the public senses inaction, speculation grows. Thus, silence is designed to maintain equilibrium, a calm exterior, a controlled internal process, and a buffer against the unpredictable forces of media and public reaction. But it is a delicate dance, because every internal whisper, every observed movement, could trigger a response that the institution may not be able to fully manage. Meanwhile, Harry, thousands of miles away, experiences the silence differently. In this narrative, the absence of news is deafening. His instincts as a father, protector, and individual converge. He senses urgency not from announcements or alerts, but from the lack of them. The tension mounts. The documents may be routine, the staff professional, and the procedures deliberate, but the stakes are intensely personal. Every delay, every pause, every unspoken word compounds the pressure. This silence also amplifies the audience's curiosity. For viewers following this dramatized narrative, the absence of information generates suspense. Questions arise naturally. What is in the document? Why has it triggered internal action? Who noticed it first? What decisions are being made behind closed doors? And perhaps most importantly, how will Harry respond when the silence is broken and the consequences become unavoidable? By the chapter's midpoint, internal deliberations have progressed. The palace understands the discrepancy is real, but the interpretation is nuanced. Legal advisors weigh the implications. Historical scholars consider precedent. Administrative staff confirm accuracy. And everyone involved is aware that, although no public statement has been made, the clock is ticking. The longer the silence persists, the more pressure builds on all parties, and the more urgent the eventual response becomes. Emotional tension is heightened by the dual nature of the situation. On one hand, it is procedural, a matter of internal verification. On the other hand, it is deeply personal. Harry's absence creates a gap in communication. The institution must consider both protocol and potential reactions. The document, minor in isolation, becomes central to a narrative that blends duty, emotion, and historical significance. Every decision has ripple effects, every action carries weight, and every pause builds suspense. The palace reaction also highlights the contrast between public perception and private reality. To the outside observer, nothing is happening. No headlines, no commentary, no press release. But inside, tension is mounting. Meetings, memos, reviews, and consultations are underway. The contrast between calm exterior and intense internal activity underscores the narrative tension. It reminds the audience that in systems governed by legacy and scrutiny, the most powerful events often occur unseen. As the chapter progresses, it becomes clear that silence, while strategic, cannot last indefinitely. The flagged record has reached a level of urgency that demands a decision. Every moment of delay increases anticipation and pressure. The audience, now fully engaged, senses that a turning point is approaching. The calm, procedural exterior of the palace is a prelude to action that will soon unfold, and the tension is almost unbearable. And just as the chapter approaches its conclusion, the narrative delivers a cliffhanger. The silence that has dominated the palace response is about to break. A decision is imminent. A communication will be made. And somewhere across the ocean, a father is preparing to act in response to information he has not yet fully received. The juxtaposition of silent urgency and impending action leaves the audience hanging on the edge of anticipation. It was a moment that began quietly but carried the weight of a storm. The phone rang, a simple, ordinary device in the hand of a man thousands of miles from the center of power, but in that call, the world shifted. A single voice on the other end, professional yet urgent, conveyed information that would trigger a chain of events no one anticipated. The content of the call was vague at first, just enough to alert the recipient to an issue of potential significance. But the implications were immediate, electric, and personal. For Harry, it was a summons that could not be ignored. Imagine Harry receiving the call. The sun might have been rising over a city thousands of miles away, light filtering through hotel windows, calm and serene. In one moment, he is attending to routine engagements. In the next, the serenity is shattered by urgency, gravity, and ambiguity. The human instinct is to assess, to question, to protect, but the additional weight of institutional scrutiny amplifies that instinct. This is a father receiving news of a potential anomaly in his child's official records, but a father who is also a public figure, a member of a globally recognized family, and a man whose every reaction is magnified in the court of public perception. The call itself is brief, almost clinical in delivery. "You need to see this," says the voice on the line. No elaboration, no reassurance, no details, just urgency. The simplicity of the statement carries immense weight because it signals both importance and discretion. The caller is not speaking for drama. They are acting under protocol. And the mere act of alerting Harry demonstrates recognition that this is not a matter to be handled remotely. It is a matter that demands presence, assessment, and immediate action. And yet, the lack of detail is deliberate. In the palace, even internal communication is measured. Information is conveyed according to hierarchy, sensitivity, and procedural necessity. There is no need for embellishment, no need for speculation. Just the facts, enough to provoke a response without creating unnecessary panic. This strategic ambiguity is part of the institution's DNA. It allows individuals to act decisively while maintaining control over the narrative. In this case, the ambiguity fuels both urgency and tension. As Harry absorbs the message, his mind races. The protective instinct is immediate. Is the child in danger? Is the discrepancy an administrative issue, a legal concern, or something more complex? Every parent knows the anxiety of uncertainty, but when combined with the historical, institutional, and public dimensions of royalty, the anxiety multiplies. It is not just concern for a child. It is concern for legacy, perception, and potential ramifications that extend far beyond the immediate moment. The call sets in motion a flurry of action. Phones are answered, flights are considered, schedules reworked. Decisions that would normally take days are compressed into hours. Harry, acting on instinct and information, begins preparations for an immediate return. The contrast between calm abroad and urgency at home creates a sense of narrative tension that is almost cinematic. The audience is left imagining the rapid sequence of events: calls exchanged, bags packed, security arranged, and a private flight prepared, all before most of the world even knows a problem exists. The call also introduces an emotional layer. Harry's response is not only logistical, but deeply personal. This is not a PR move. This is not a calculated public appearance. This is a father responding to an anomaly in his child's records. The combination of professional, institutional pressure with deeply personal emotion creates a tension that resonates with the audience. It humanizes a figure often portrayed through media optics and allows viewers to connect with the emotional stakes in a way that is visceral, immediate, and relatable. Meanwhile, inside the palace, the ripple effects of that call begin to unfold. The knowledge that Harry has been alerted sets off its own chain reaction. Advisors review protocols for communicating sensitive information. Legal teams assess potential scenarios. Internal messaging systems are checked for clarity, redundancy, and accuracy. The call itself becomes a pivot point, highlighting the intersection of human instinct and institutional procedure. What begins as a personal notification quickly escalates into a matter of organizational strategy, coordination, and anticipation. At the heart of this fictionalized story is the idea that information is power, but timing is everything. The urgency of the call, combined with the ambiguity of its content, forces decisions to be made under pressure. Every moment of hesitation carries consequences. Every choice has ramifications. Harry must act quickly, balancing the instinct to protect with the need to understand the full scope of the situation. The palace, on the other hand, observes, calculates, and prepares, knowing that the arrival of Harry will bring both resolution and complication. This duality, the personal versus the institutional, drives the tension. The call is the catalyst, but it is also a lens through which the audience can explore broader themes: responsibility, authority, communication, and the delicate balance between procedure and emotion. It illustrates how a single piece of information, delivered with urgency, can transform routine life into a high-stakes narrative. And in doing so, it draws viewers further into the story, compelling them to follow every development with anticipation. The fictional scenario also allows for exploration of Harry's internal conflict. As he prepares to return, he must navigate multiple pressures: concern for his child, awareness of public perception, consideration of institutional expectations, and personal reflection on past experiences with scrutiny and media attention. Each element contributes to the narrative tension, illustrating how a seemingly small event, a phone call, can catalyze a convergence of professional, personal, and public dynamics. By the chapter's midpoint, the urgency escalates. Travel arrangements are finalized. Security protocols activated. Communications with advisors abroad and officials in the UK established. The narrative paints a vivid picture of coordinated action executed with speed and precision. But underlying the efficiency is emotion, fear, protectiveness, determination. As the call ends, Harry is left with a sense of immediacy that cannot be ignored. There is no room for hesitation. Every minute counts. The narrative tension is palpable, bridging the gap between distant concern and immediate action. The audience experiences the same heightened awareness, imagining the flight, the airport, the journey across continents, and the inevitable confrontation with the institution. The chapter also explores the paradoxical effect of secrecy. The call itself is private, confidential, and deliberately vague. But secrecy amplifies anxiety. The absence of information forces imagination to fill the gaps, creating suspense both for Harry and the audience. Questions multiply. What exactly did the flagged document reveal? How severe is the discrepancy? What will be the response upon arrival? The ambiguity transforms a routine notification into a narrative cliffhanger. And just when the tension seems almost unbearable, the chapter closes with a suspenseful turn. Harry's decision to return is made, the plane ticket booked, and preparations underway. Yet the audience knows that arrival is only the beginning. The palace awaits. Internal reviews continue. Questions remain unanswered, and the collision of personal urgency with institutional procedure is inevitable. In a world of global communication, encrypted messages, and instant access to information, it might seem reasonable to handle a problem from a distance. A phone call, a Zoom meeting, a carefully worded email. These tools allow many to manage crises without physically stepping into the arena. But in the fictional narrative we are exploring, Prince Harry faced a dilemma: to act from afar or to return immediately. And the choice to return wasn't merely logistical. It was deeply symbolic, strategic, and intensely personal. Why not fight from afar? On paper, it could have been the easier path. Distance provides a buffer. Distance allows for calculated responses without immediate scrutiny. Distance can shield from emotional overload. But distance also diminishes control. It delays reactions. It limits access to key decision-makers. And in a situation where time, perception, and authority intersect, distance can become a liability rather than an advantage. Harry's decision to return immediately reflects an understanding that some crises cannot be managed remotely. This is not just about access to documents or authority figures. It's about presence, perception, and influence. In the narrative, the moment he decides to leave abroad is when theory meets reality. The discrepancy in the school record is no longer abstract. It is a tangible issue that demands his attention, oversight, and authority. Acting from afar could have left room for misinterpretation, bureaucratic delay, or unwanted speculation. Physical presence, in contrast, asserts agency, communicates seriousness, and accelerates resolution. The choice to return also underscores the personal stakes. This is about a child, a parent, and family identity. Harry's protective instinct is immediate. He cannot sit back while a document challenges the record of his child's identity, regardless of how minor it might appear to others. This emotional driver intensifies the narrative, allowing the audience to connect with universal feelings of parental concern, responsibility, and urgency. The story reminds viewers that, sometimes, action is dictated not just by procedure, but by instinct, love, and the pressing need to safeguard what matters most. The palace's internal procedures amplify the need for presence. Decisions at the highest levels require verification, consultation, and direct engagement. Advisors and officials can manage communications, assess legality, and consult historical precedent, but the involvement of the parent, particularly one with public visibility and influence, is a variable they cannot ignore. Harry's return ensures that he is part of the process, able to influence decisions, ask questions directly, and observe proceedings firsthand. Distance, in this context, is a disadvantage. Presence, conversely, is power, and there is the matter of timing. In this story, the discrepancy is not static, it is part of a living system. Internal alerts, verification processes, and historical records move in real time. Delay can escalate risk. A week spent managing from abroad could allow rumors to surface internally, generate misunderstandings, or create procedural missteps. By returning immediately, Harry positions himself to respond proactively rather than reactively, shaping outcomes rather than being shaped by them. The decision also highlights the intersection of public scrutiny and private action. Even in fictionalized terms, the world watches the lives of royals with relentless curiosity. Every delay, every perceived inaction, becomes fodder for speculation. By returning, Harry preempts the narrative. He signals seriousness, urgency, and engagement. In the delicate ecosystem of reputation, perception, and legacy, acting decisively is both practical and symbolic. But the decision to return is not without risk. Traveling across time zones, navigating security protocols, and entering a highly scrutinized environment exposes one to logistical challenges and scrutiny. The palace itself, while procedural, is a complex ecosystem with hidden rules, sensitivities, and protocols. Arriving without preparation or awareness could exacerbate tension, trigger defensive measures, or complicate negotiations. Yet the risk is necessary. The stakes, the identity of a child, the integrity of a record, and the credibility of decisions demand immediate action, regardless of personal inconvenience or exposure. This narrative also emphasizes strategy. Returning immediately is not merely a reaction, it is a calculated move. Presence enables Harry to assess the situation firsthand, interpret nuances, and engage with decision-makers directly. It ensures that he is informed, influential, and prepared to act. Remote management, in contrast, risks miscommunication, delayed reactions, and partial understanding. The story underscores the value of being physically present when stakes are high, when timelines are compressed, and when the consequences of inaction are significant. Emotion and pragmatism intersect in a way that heightens narrative tension. Harry is not returning solely because of procedure or protocol. He is returning because of instinct, responsibility, and urgency. The audience sees a figure motivated by both reason and emotion, creating a dual tension that is compelling, relatable, and human. Viewers are drawn into the narrative, imagining themselves in similar positions. torn between distant management and immediate action, weighing the costs, risks, and urgency of presence versus distance. The story also allows for reflection on the nature of urgency itself. Crises are rarely simple. They are layered, nuanced, and evolving. The flag school record is not static. It is part of a larger system, part of a living network of documentation, legacy, and institutional procedure. The longer a potential anomaly goes unaddressed, the more complex the resolution becomes. By returning, Harry intersects directly with the system, influencing outcomes and ensuring that he is part of the solution rather than a bystander to the problem. At the same time, the narrative illustrates the psychological dimension of decision-making under pressure. The choice to return immediately is emotionally charged, infused with protective instinct, anxiety, and anticipation. Every mile crossed, every flight taken, every step closer to the palace amplifies the tension. The audience experiences this vicariously, feeling the weight of urgency, the stakes of parental responsibility, and the pressure of navigating institutional systems while emotionally invested. As the chapter progresses, the story expands on logistics, planning, and the human drama of departure. Security arrangements, flight coordination, and communications with advisors abroad are described in detail, emphasizing the convergence of urgency, strategy, and emotion. The narrative tension builds with every passing hour. Airports, boarding gates, transatlantic flights. All mundane actions are infused with heightened significance. The audience is drawn into the pace of the story, feeling each moment as a step toward confrontation and resolution. By the end of the chapter, the audience understands the full weight of the decision. Returning now, rather than managing remotely, is a statement of urgency, authority, and care. It is a recognition that some problems demand direct engagement, immediate action, and the presence of those most intimately connected. The chapter closes on a suspenseful note. Harry is airborne, heading toward a convergence of personal, institutional, and public tensions that will define the next phase of the story. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Chapter 5 complete. Say go to move on to Chapter 6, The Flight Back, a race against time and perception. Go. Perfect. Let's continue with Chapter 6, The Flight Back, a race against time and perception, fully expanded with at least 2,000 words, keeping the dramatic, high-retention exposé style. Chapter 6, The Flight Back, a race against time and perception. The plane engines roared to life, a low growl beneath the tense atmosphere of a cabin filled with both urgency and anticipation. Prince Harry sat rigid, staring out the window as the city below shrank into dots of light. Thousands of miles stretched between him and the palace, a distance measured not just in geography, but in consequences, decisions, and perception. Every mile of the flight carried him closer to a confrontation with institutions, procedures, and individuals whose lives intersected with his in intricate and high-stakes ways. Flying back was more than a logistical necessity. It was a psychological journey, a race against both time and perception. In the world of royalty, where public scrutiny is relentless, every action, even a flight, is interpreted, analyzed, and dissected. The choice to return immediately rather than delay or handle matters remotely sent signals to the palace, the public, and the media. It communicated urgency, concern, and seriousness without a single word spoken. And yet, while perception loomed large, the reality inside the cabin was far more human. A father racing against uncertainty, grappling with incomplete information, and preparing for a confrontation he could not fully predict. The flight itself became a crucible. Isolation in a private cabin provided space for reflection, strategy, and planning. But the quiet was deceptive. Each moment carried the weight of possibility, tension, and expectation. What awaited at the palace was unknown. Would the discrepancy in the school record be a simple clerical error? Or would it reveal deeper, more complex implications? The uncertainty magnified every second, creating a suspense that was palpable both to Harry and, through the narrative lens, to the audience. Inside the cabin, Harry reviewed the details he had received, the brief, cryptic alerts from the school administrators and palace aides. Each note was precise, yet incomplete, highlighting anomalies without providing resolution. The missing clarity forced him to consider multiple scenarios simultaneously. What had the flagged document truly revealed? How accurate were the initial reports? Who had access to the information, and how far had it traveled already? Every unanswered question compounded the tension, reinforcing the urgency of physical presence. And yet, the journey was not only about preparation, it was about control. In a situation where time is compressed, distance creates risk. Communications can be intercepted, messages misinterpreted, and delays magnified. By being on the flight, Harry assumed direct agency. He could respond, adapt, and influence outcomes in real time rather than relying solely on intermediaries. The act of boarding the plane symbolized a shift from passive concern to active engagement, a transition critical to the narrative's tension and pacing. The audience, meanwhile, is drawn into the narrative through the humanization of the journey. Long flights, in ordinary circumstances, are mundane. Here, each detail, seatbelt clicks, cabin lights dimming, the subtle hum of engines, serves to heighten anticipation. The mundane becomes charged, every routine motion layered with meaning. As viewers follow Harry's progress across continents, they experience the dual tension of urgency and vulnerability. They understand that the miles traveled are not merely physical. They are emotional, strategic, and symbolic. Throughout the flight, Harry is also acutely aware of perception. The royal family exists in a world where optics matter. Every arrival, every movement, every interaction is scrutinized. Returning now, rather than later, signals commitment, seriousness, and immediate action. But it also exposes him to speculation. The media, if alerted, would interpret the flight as dramatic, urgent, or even controversial. The narrative tension arises from this intersection of personal urgency and public visibility, reminding viewers that in the lives of high-profile figures, action is never neutral. Every decision carries multiple layers of consequence. The journey also allows for introspection, deepening the emotional resonance of the narrative. Harry reflects not just on the immediate problem, the flagged school record, but on broader patterns of scrutiny, expectation, and responsibility. The flight becomes a metaphorical bridge between distant safety and immediate engagement, between observation and action, between theory and reality. The audience is invited to consider the psychological weight of rapid, high-stakes decisions, as well as the human emotions that drive them: protectiveness, fear, anticipation, and resolve. Simultaneously, the narrative emphasizes the strategic elements of the return. Communications are maintained with key advisors, legal teams, and intermediaries who provide updates and context. Flight routes are chosen not only for efficiency, but for security, discretion, and coordination. Every logistical detail, timing, seating arrangements, connections, is deliberate, reinforcing the theme that high-stakes decisions blend personal instinct with meticulous planning. The audience witnesses the convergence of emotion and strategy, creating engagement and suspense. As the hours pass, tension mounts further. Harry's mind races with possibilities. Will the discrepancy in Archie's records be a minor issue resolved quickly, or the first signal of a complication that could ripple outward? The narrative draws attention to uncertainty, emphasizing how even small anomalies can trigger high-stakes responses when legacy, perception, and identity intersect. The audience is invited to experience anticipation in real time, as though sitting beside him in the cabin, feeling the gravity of every mile traversed. The flight also serves to heighten narrative pacing. Short, punchy lines convey immediacy. The engines hum, a seatbelt clicks, the steward passes. Longer, reflective sentences explore internal thought processes, layering strategy, emotion, and anticipation. This mix maintains attention while building tension. Each shift mirrors the duality of the situation: physical movement across time zones juxtaposed with internal calculation and emotional urgency. Meanwhile, speculation simmers outside the plane. Though the public may not yet be aware, insiders, aides, and advisors anticipate the consequences of his return. Even without explicit knowledge of the flagged record, the movement of a high-profile individual triggers curiosity, concern, and procedural readiness. This tension between action and expectation amplifies suspense for the audience, providing a sense of stakes beyond the immediate scene. As the plane approaches the UK, the narrative focuses on convergence. Every mile brings Harry closer to the palace, closer to potential confrontation, closer to resolution or escalation. The quiet hum of the cabin contrasts with the storm building within the institution he is about to enter. The audience feels anticipation, knowing that the flight is only a prelude to the high-stakes negotiations, verifications, and emotional confrontations that will follow. The chapter closes on a cliffhanger that emphasizes suspense, anticipation, and emotional stakes. The plane descends, the city lights grow larger, and the palace waits. Questions linger. What will officials reveal? How will Harry respond? What truths or discrepancies will the next hours uncover? The audience is left hanging, primed for the next chapter where presence, procedure, and perception collide. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Chapter 6 complete. Say go to move on to Chapter 7, landing at Heathrow, the moment of confrontation. Go. Perfect. Let's continue with Chapter 7, landing at Heathrow, the moment of confrontation, fully expanded with at least 2,000 words, keeping the dramatic, high-retention exposé style. Chapter 7. Landing at Heathrow, the moment of confrontation. The wheels of the plane kissed the tarmac with a muted thud, and the engine's roar began to fade, replaced by the mechanical hum of taxiing lights and signals. Prince Harry's hands tightened on the armrests. Every second felt elongated, each movement amplified by anticipation. Heathrow Airport, sprawling and methodical, seemed unusually quiet, as if the world itself were holding its breath. The city outside glittered, indifferent to the personal and institutional storm about to unfold. But inside Harry, thousands of miles of flight, uncertainty, and preparation had coalesced into a single point of tension: arrival. Landing was more than a physical transition. It was the threshold between observation and engagement, distance and presence, speculation and action. Across the Atlantic, a single phone call had set in motion a meticulously orchestrated response. But now, miles of air, security checks, and bureaucratic layers had condensed into a moment that would define the next chapter of his life and the integrity of the flag school record. This was no ordinary arrival. Every step off the plane carried weight, meaning, and consequence. Stepping into Heathrow's controlled corridors, Harry was met with an atmosphere of anticipation, though outwardly calm. Security personnel moved with practiced efficiency, but behind each nod, each scanned badge, and each subtle exchange, there was awareness. A high-profile arrival could escalate a simple discrepancy into a diplomatic or procedural incident. In this story, the tension was palpable. Airport staff, aides, and officials all operated in the quiet tension between protocol and unpredictability, knowing that every movement might be scrutinized, misinterpreted, or misrepresented. Harry's mind, however, was not on procedures. It was on the document that had set everything into motion, the school record with its allegedly inconsistent details. Was it a clerical error, or a symptom of something larger? Every detail he had reviewed on the flight now demanded